The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Terry Olson. I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, across the moat from Oakland, in the northern part of what I consider to be the best thing to do. Now, get this. I've got, all the different states. They can argue. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the minor leagues. But let me introduce the guest host tonight, George Casey here, Philadelphia. Right? How are you? Hi. George?
Good evening, everybody.
It's not the best state when you're going to get 2 feet of snow.
Well, it's not baseball weather, I'll tell you that.
All right. David Hubler, Virginia.
Yeah, good evening.
What's the weather like in Virginia?
Well, it's cold, but it's clear, there's not much going on. We're expecting not too much here, just a mix. We give it all to the north.
Okay. Bock is here, and he is expecting snow. He's on Long Island.
Doesn't bother me in the least. I'm going to go in my driveway and build a snowman.
Okay. When you get finished, Hal, you come down and build one for me.
We are all in a celebratory.
It's going to be wonderful.
We are all in a celebratory mood, Christmas notwithstanding. Even with Christmas, we are celebrating a new president-elect as of the official announcement today by Mitch McConnell, who is recognizing, big of him after 38 days, that we're going to have a new president, and that's kind of nice. We need a change, not to belabor his incompetence and all those folks who are dead, but this is a welcome breath of air. And as Hal and I were talking off the air, they put needle to arm today, and it wasn't steroidal. So when you're used to hearing a needle around the baseball conversation, it's in the butt and it's steroids.
Right.
But none of that. We have a vaccine. Apparently a few companies have a work and go. They've been able to transport it. And I will give the president a lot of credit for the operation, whatever they called it, to get this thing going. It's almost like the fireman who's a pyromaniac starts the fire and then puts it out. But thank God it's being put out. And we're going to talk minor league baseball. How about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good, Ralph, that's certainly a good subject. And, I just wanted to put my 2 cents in here about the COVID thing. Hopefully, by the time we get a couple months down the road, we'll be almost back to normal after we get all the vaccine and people vaccinated, and maybe we can have a Major League Baseball season like we're used to seeing. I mean, I guess that's wishful thinking, but I don't think I could personally stomach another season like we had this past year.
Yeah, amen to that.
This was horrible on every level. The runner starting at second, the abolishment of the leagues. Nobody talked National League. Nobody talked American League. I wonder how those statistics will go in the all-time records. Most hits for the National League, that kind of thing.
I think they've got to asterisk the whole season. I mean, those records can't be measured against anything that's happened before, because you got a 60-game season versus a 162-game season.
Yeah, and the same thing I think is true for the winners of like the MVP and the batting crown. I mean, it's a third of a season.
Right,
there should be some asterisks.
You can't take that away from the individual player.
We're not.
Either.
We're just saying it's got to be asterisks.
No, if they if they asterisk Roger Maris is 61, they can certainly asterisk this whole situation with Major League Baseball.
That's right.
Well,
that's 100% right.
And I think you guys if you remember, the official asterisk of the 61 season of Roger Maris's home run never got into the record books. It got into
there never was an asterisk. No.
Right, there was never an asterisk.
Never was an asterisk, no.
No, they talked about it.
Although, remember how we used to spend the winter months waiting for the World Almanac to come out and get all the statistics from there? I don't know if you guys were into that, but the Almanac did have the asterisk.
The asterisk, I don't remember the World Almanac having such detailed. Oh, yes, I guess it did. Yeah, I used to love to read that publication. There was another one that came out, too, on an annual basis, and I can't for the life of me think of the name right now. But
the Farmer's Almanac.
No, that was different. That was totally different. This was just like the World Almanac, which had all the countries and all the flags and all the, the Constitution and just about any kind of facts you wanted to know. But there was a second one, and I can't think of it. It was one of them was published, I think, by the World Telegram and Sun, if I'm not mistaken, and the other one was published by the Journal American Publishers. I don't recall that, but and I didn't know it had the asterisk in it on Maris's home run total.
Let me ask you guys, and I know we're supposed to be talking minor league baseball, but we got off on this subject. Who's the all-time leader in home runs? Who's the all-time leader in home runs? It's an honest question.
I would still have to say Henry Aaron.
You betcha, pal. For me, it is.
Yeah, but on the night that Bonds broke the record, on the scoreboard of AT&T Park or whatever they were calling it at the time, they had Henry Aaron come on with the classiest announcement and congratulations of Bonds and this, that, and the other thing. I think steroids have done the worst they did was not. We can't compare generation to generation. I can't tell you if Bobby Bonds or Barry Bonds was a better hitter than Ted Williams. There's no way of determining that because
they played in different eras.
Yeah, exactly. But beyond that, Barry Bonds changed, and 80% of the players that were playing in the 80s or in Barry Bonds' 80s, 90s, in Barry Bonds' era, they were partaking. I mean, he and Clemens certainly weren't the only ones. And so when you say maybe that's a good place for an asterisk on that home run record.
Well, it was basically because the season had been extended. That's where the asterisk came in from for Roger Maris. It was a question if it was a longer season.
Right, but you could have an asterisk for any number of reasons, and how about the reason that he broke the record, and let it be said that he was playing under a different set of circumstances. When you change the chemical makeup of your body, it's different than just era to era. Am I correct? And that, I think how you were referring to that. Am I correct?
Yes, and you have to remember, baseball played a different brand of the game until 1947, when Jackie Robinson broke the color line. There were no players of color playing against Babe Ruth and that era. And
right.
suddenly, there were players of color, and there were tremendous athletes, I mean, the greatest player I ever saw play was Willie Mays, and I think you guys would agree with me on that.
Okay, so let me give a quick segue to that and get into minors a little bit. We'll get back to yours. You say Willie Mays. We heard a little bit from George Case before, and we're going to talk minor leagues. And when I think of the three of those, I talk about Trenton, New Jersey. And tell us about Willie Mays playing at Trenton, if you will, George Case.
Yeah, well, this is what I want to mention about Willie Mays. I mean, in the minor leagues, and this is a prime example. I mean, Willie Mays started the 1950 season in Birmingham, and then he moved up to Trenton. He went up the ladder and wound then he went to Minneapolis. So he was, those three teams were all minor league teams, and he climbed the ladder. And that's what the value of minor league baseball to me is, that, these guys are playing, they're moving up in the competition, and as they get better and better, they move to the next level. And, when baseball was in its heyday, I think there were something like, a couple hundred minor league teams. There were like 6 different levels of baseball, and you had to climb the ladder. I mean, today you're down to just so few teams. And what's happened in Trenton, and it really affects me personally because my dad was from Trenton. Willie Mays played in Trenton. And the fact that Trenton Thunder, they just lost the Yankees franchise. After 19 years, the Yankees are moving up to Somerset, New Jersey, get a little bit closer to New York City. And now Trenton is left with a 6,500-seat stadium, and they're going to have an independent league team put in there. And I can tell you that team will not draw flies compared to what the Trenton Thunder did, because fans came to watch the Trenton Thunder because they had a chance to see some young guys who might wind up on the big stage in not too long. Or they had guys who were up in the big leagues like Jeter and Clemens. They came down to Trenton to do their rehab. So the local baseball fans had a chance to see some major league stars, right in their backyard. So for me personally, to see Trenton lose the franchise, and I knew the people that, first brought Trenton baseball back in 1994, after the last year that Willie Mays was there was 1950, Trenton went 44 years without professional baseball. So it really bothers me. And Ralph, you brought up Trenton, but I had to get on my soapbox because it's something that's just happened here in the last couple of weeks. And
the demise of the minor leagues.
Well, it is, and it's a prime example, right?
George's description of what happened in Trenton happened here in New York. Staten Island Yankees. Now, the Staten Island Yankees were an affiliate of the New York Yankees. Right. And one day they were, and the next day they weren't, and that was devastating to that team. They apparently are closing down. They're not doing any business, and what are they going to do? They have a terrific little stadium right on the waterfront. I've been there, and what now? What happens now? No team.
You know what, Hal? That is exactly part of the problem that I see, is that, and they can look back and say, okay, in the 20s and 30s and 40s, some of those minor league, stadiums were decrepit and awful. But the last few years, some of the minor league stadiums, you're talking about Staten Island, I'm talking about Trenton, Portland, Maine, same thing. They've got a beautiful stadium. These are some really up-to-date modern stadiums, 6,500, 7,000 people. And now you're going to put a bunch of either college kids or independent league players that nobody's going to have any interest or knowledge in, and you're going to ask them to play. And before, maybe if they're going to get, instead of 6,500, maybe they'll get 1,000 people to come and watch.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Now, if you could project ahead, what is all this decimation of the minor league system, of moving up, of proving yourself on one level, going on to the next level, this, that, and the other thing? What is that, and this is rhetorical almost, what is that going to do to the quality of baseball in 5 years?
I'm going to jump in here. I'm just going to say I personally think it's going to have a detrimental effect because the guys are not challenged. And, you're going to get guys, and they're up there now. I see guys playing Major League Baseball, a few years ago, they had no business being there.
Right. At this point, that's before the decimation of the minors.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with George completely. I mean, you see ball players doing some bonehead things on the field that if they'd spent
they don't have
years
fundamentals.
That's
the
what
minor
I'm saying,
leagues.
Yeah.
The minor leagues were a great training area for
they were
teaching, a laboratory, teaching players how to play the game properly. They taught them fundamentals. You watch a baseball game, and I'll guarantee you that at least 3, maybe 4 times in the game, fundamentals were butchered, and the nature of the game was changed because of that, or the outcome of the game. That's where they learn. That's how you learn to play the game in the minor leagues.
That's
now
right.
I don't know where they're going to learn to play the game. I mean, it's awful. It's just it's awful for the communities that have lost teams. Well, baseball. I don't know. Baseball is the national pastime. It always has been, and it always will be, as far as I'm concerned. And it was a community centerpiece in many small towns in America. America is not all New York City and Los Angeles and Chicago. It's small towns.
It is. Yep. Hal, you're absolutely right. Hal, the one thing that I'm glad you mentioned the small towns. I mean, the small towns are being decimated by this, and a lot of times, the local fans, that was their only outlet to go to a ball game, and they identified with the players, and they lived in the community. And a lot of them would put up the housing for the players during the season, all that kind of stuff. And now you're taking it all away from them. And
especially in
Washington, and where David is in Washington, I mean, that's one area. Where I am in Philadelphia, that's another area, metropolitan areas. But you look at some of these little tiny minor league towns. I mean, baseball was the whole thing in the summertime. To take a family and go watch a ball game and spend a couple dollars, as opposed to try to, get into a major league ballpark, and it's going to cost you a couple $100 before you even have a chance to sit down in your seat.
Well, it's more than that too, because if you're talking back to the heyday of the minor leagues, you've got to remember that the 16 major league teams were so located that there was a vast opening from St. Louis west and south. I mean, There were no teams in Texas. There were no teams in Arizona, Colorado, even California didn't have any major league teams in those days. So if you were living in any place like that, your chances of you couldn't just pick up for a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon and drive over to the major league ballpark. You were required, so to speak, to spend time in a minor league ballpark.
Right.
And that's where they grew. And that's what you're right. I mean, there were some Class D ball clubs, I'm sure, that guys ground their way up to the major leagues with virtually no money at all.
No.
And so,
there's no money in minor league baseball for the players. What's there, David and Hal and Ralph, what is there is that the dream. The dream is that they're going to make it up to the major leagues. But in the meantime, I mean, they're playing, lower classifications. I mean, they're fighting and scrapping every day to try to move up that ladder. But they are, as Hal's talking about, they are learning the fundamentals of baseball. They're learning how to play the game. And now you have, you're going to have, and I see it all the time. I agree. Guys don't know how to bunt. They don't know how to run the bases properly. They're throwing to the wrong bases. They're doing all the fundamental stuff that if they had time in the minor leagues, that they'd work on that stuff. And my dad was a minor league coach. He coached at Oneonta, New York. Well, they don't have a team anymore. They've got a college wooden bat league team now, but my dad would take the guys that were coming right out of college, and he really liked doing what he was doing because he was teaching them to play baseball, and number two, what life is really all about for a professional athlete.
George, two things. I saw your post on your dad and Oneonta today. You refer to him as the coach of the team.
Right.
Coach is in college.
Right.
He was the manager in the
Well,
pros.
yeah, but I use coach because that's the fact that Ralph. That's he was a one. When you're at that level, you're one person. You're not a manager like you are in a major league where you got a whole bunch of coaches and bench coaches, hitting coaches, whatever. In the minor leagues, my dad was doing the whole thing, so I put in he was a coach because that's what he actually was.
Okay, he was, but officially he was a manager.
Well, officially,
I didn't want to slight him. Reading it almost slights him. And the Case family is going to be a big part of my book, so I'm very protective.
Ralph, I appreciate that, and I thought about saying manager, but I know because the hours that my dad spent and the fact I was up at Oneonta last year, and a lot of the players came back that played for my father, and they were so complimentary about what he did. So, he really was. He was a coach. He was a father figure. He wasn't just, sitting in the dugout pushing buttons because that's not what the job of a minor league manager is.
No, and that's why I admire the entry-level coaches and managers so much. They set the tone for what a player is going to be and how he's going to progress and what his work attitude is and everything else. The other thing I wanted to talk to you, George, about your last tirade, if you will, and it was in a nice way.
I'm sorry.
I could add to that. How about the development of the umpires?
Right.
And
very much so. Absolutely.
That's a big thing.
It's a teaching issue. It's teaching people how to play the game, how to officiate the game. It's a laboratory, and yet baseball, in its wisdom, in its infinite wisdom, decided to turn its back on that laboratory. Now, explain to me what the logic of that is. Explain to me why baseball decided that this was the way to go. Are they saving money? How much money are they saving? Not very much.
Well, you can't even equate it to the loss of revenue from this year due to the COVID, because they were planning to do this before the COVID pandemic came about. And
they were.
Yeah, sure they were, and they dropped 40 teams from 160 to 120. I think those are the numbers, and you say, well, yeah, there's got to be a financial aspect to it, of course. But let's face it, teams like the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Chicago clubs, they have the money, Boston, they have the money to support minor league baseball because that's their lifeblood.
It's an investment. It's not a money thing. You look at it as something that's going to make your team better.
And is Major League Baseball going to reimburse the cities and towns that spent $249 million on the stadium just limited?
A new voice, David Hubler, will introduce
Luke. You're with us.
His friend and workmate.
Yeah, hi. This is Luke Erickson, probably the premier maven of minor league baseball, and has his own podcast all about minor league baseball. When we meet in the office sometimes, and I ask him a question about Major League Baseball, he won't have an answer, but anything about the minor leagues, Luke knows. I'm glad you're with us.
Welcome, Luke.
What's that?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for being on it. I've been with the pandemic. This is
Luke. I think you're breaking up a little bit, Luke. Would you do me a favor and hang up and call right back?
Sure.
Or get to a different position if you're on a cell phone. You were fine for the first moment or so. Can you do that?
Let me try again. I can do.
Yeah, you're all broken up.
Okay, call back in a bit. I don't know where we were.
I was going to say, I think one of the old Red Sox, Pawtucket, I think they're gone now too, if I recall correctly. Their team's in Pawtucket, Bangor, Maine.
Right.
I mean that's where the Red Sox nation grew out of. I mean,
yeah, it did, David. It did. The fact is, I go to Maine every year. And Red Sox Nation is in fact real. It's those minor league teams. I mean, Boston Red Sox. That's legendary, and everybody follows the Red Sox. But they also follow Pawtucket and Portland, Maine, and everybody who's associated with the Red Sox. That's where the fan base is in New England.
How about the jobs lost by the people? The vendors in the minor league, the public address announcer, the radio announcer. I mean, there are just a countless amount of lives. People that had part-time jobs, that were retired, that
I think a lot of that is volunteer work. I really do. I believe.
No, it's not really. It's not. It's good. It's wages. People very rarely do volunteer work in this economy, and
we're not talking about this economy. I'm talking about under normal circumstances. Retirees that spend their afternoons at a ballpark.
Yeah, but they're not doing it for nothing.
Not now. No.
And certainly, and they're not doing it at all now. It's a crime. Has Luke come back yet?
I'm back.
Okay, great.
I'm back. Yeah.
You sound much better.
Yeah, at the it's they used to brag. Now I know this is our blow because
no, it's not
Luke?
working.
Brag about.
Okay, are you on a cell phone, Luke?
Using the software. I'm using the AP for work.
Can you get to a ground line and try again? Can I ask you to do that?
With my phone, unfortunately, don't have a line.
Can you stand outside, maybe?
Yeah, could you either go outside or?
Is there a cell tower nearby?
There's one behind me here. I'm off 56.
We can't.
I'll try one more time.
Well, it just simply isn't working. So I don't know what to tell you. But we're going to go on and talk more about the minor leagues.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd be able to, give us a rundown of who's where and what's happened, and what are the prospects and prognosis for the leagues that exist. It's disappointing that the cell phone doesn't work when you need it. I'm proud to say I still have a landline, and I'm not about to give it up.
And I do too.
Right.
Okay, but you do know that your landline is connected to the internet.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about the internet.
But all right, is it better now?
Yeah. Well, keep talking. We'll know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm now on my cell phone. Like I said, I don't have a landline anymore. I strictly use cell phone.
Well, your reception sounds much
better. Yeah.
Would you be good enough, Luke, to continue and talk about your impression of what's going on in the minor leagues as of today?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed. I feel like this is just a penny wise and pound foolish decision. You know, we've been talking about this for, you know, on my site, because there hasn't been much else to talk about it for months. And it's just, you know, they're basically saving, you know, pennies on the dollar. A lot of this plan is, to no one's surprise, this is something that was conceived primarily by Houston, Milwaukee, and Baltimore to save a few bucks, and I just don't think it's worth it. And you guys talk a lot about these towns in the Northeast, but I'm more concerned about the places in like Iowa or in the upper plains where like they've lost baseball. I mean, they just don't have anything else. And that's just a shame, because you're cutting off a generation of fans. I mean, my kids don't really like baseball. You know, I'm almost 50 years old, and it's like, how are you going to attract the next generation if it's just not being played?
See, you know what's interesting? Football and basketball have built-in development leagues in the colleges. And each year the draft produces a new generation of players for the Major League Basketball and Major League Hockey, Major League Basketball and Major League Football teams. Now, Major League Baseball depends pretty much on the same group, but they're not playing the same quality of baseball. So they have to be developed in the minor leagues. Football and basketball, the minor leagues are the colleges. In baseball, the minor leagues are where you learn the craft of the game. And for some reason, I can't fathom it. Maybe Luke has a better answer for me. For some reason, baseball just seems to stick its head in the sand. And as you said, pennies on the dollar, saving pennies on the dollar. And the long-term issue is going to be the quality of the game. George mentioned that before, and I did as well. The game is going to be deteriorating because the players aren't going to learn the craft if there's no minor leagues. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and
are they counting on college baseball to be their minor leagues?
They are. That is exactly what they are doing. They are counting on shifting that development cost to the colleges, because they feel like the elite college players are the ones that can fill those gaps. What I'm concerned about is all these teams they just converted into collegiate woodbats. Where are they going to get these players? I mean,
exactly. Where are you going to?
Where are they going to come from?
That's a very good point. In fact, with the pandemic and the 60-game season and the craziness that we just came through, when you had a roster of 25, and I guess they expanded it to 27 after a while because of the pandemic. Well, what are you going to do with the rest of the players? Oh, well, we're just going to park them, and they'll work out every day. Here in New York, the Mets sent all their players, 60 players, to Brooklyn, where the Cyclones play, and they just had workouts every day. They didn't have games. They didn't develop. They couldn't develop because they didn't have games.
There's something about the intensity of a game when they're playing for real that can't be duplicated in intramural type thing.
In the squad, yeah, you're right.
No, it can't be. And you know, a lot of people go on and on about how minor league statistics are overrated, but they are better than just, right now all I have to go on when they talk about players for next year is like what the coaches say. Like, there's no scouts. All we have is the opinion of the people that are talking. Of course, they have a vested interest in talking up their guys. Where at least if there's games, you can see for yourself. You don't even have to. You can even look at stats. It's like we don't have that right now. And as you know, for me, what was very frustrating is the Nationals were one of 10 teams that wouldn't even share the video feed. Other teams took video at the alternative training sites and they shared it with the other 20 teams. But 10 teams, and the Nationals, I believe the Yankees and the Red Sox were among those that opted out. So I don't know what they're doing. It's like we have no idea what's going on. And I got to be honest with the Nationals. I think they like that. They're very, very stingy with information.
Okay. Luke, would you do me a favor now that you're coming in so clearly and you have a voice for radio? Would you, as all of you guys do, and I'm the only exception, I have a face for radio.
That's a good one, Ralph.
Well, 1 out of 74. Luke, would you give your name and website and where people could get in touch with you, please?
Absolutely.
Before I forget.
Okay, my name is Luke Erickson, and my website is nationalsprospects.com, and it's all one word.
Okay. Tell me what you thought of Dusty not being there anymore. This goes back a few years.
You're talking about Dusty Baker?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not a fan. I felt like that was an unwise move. I kind of felt like I'm not a big fan of Davey Martinez, or Dave Martinez. I'm not really a fan of using the word Davey. You know, the guy's 55 years old. But, yeah, I just, I thought that, I feel like, you know, they won the World Series, and, you know, but sometimes I feel like they won despite him, not because of him. But they won, and now, you know, unfortunately, the worst thing for Nationals fans is that they got to miss out on having a year-long hangover. That's what it always feels like.
Yes.
Well, don't forget, by winning that World Series, they struck a chord for cleanliness and truthfulness in baseball, because they beat the Houston Astros, who were banging drums and doing all kinds of funny stuff.
Well, that's another thing that we didn't get to do. We didn't get to have a whole season long of people taunting the Astros like they should have.
Yeah, they should. You're right.
You know, that's the kind of.
You know, I thought of this the other day. You say how you said banging trash cans and what have you. Should there be a revised addition to band?
That's a thought.
Wow.
That's a thought. I hadn't thought of that, but maybe.
Wow.
So Luke, which you're up in the Boston area, I guess.
That's where I'm from. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know where you're staying now, because we're all split up. You know, we don't see each other anymore.
I live in Northern Virginia. I live in Northern Virginia, and I'm originally from New England, so. I grew up as a Boston Red Sox fan.
Yeah, I don't hold that against you, but
That's okay.
But so I thought some teams like Pawtucket were no longer in the minors. Some of the more famous teams are no longer playing in them.
Well, Pawtucket, they moved to Worcester, and this year was going to be their first year. So that's not really, you know, necessarily anything to do with this plan. So they're going to be, and it's a horrible name, the Worcester Woo Sox. Oh, God.
You know, Worcester played Holyoke on Thanksgiving Day in their high school.
Yep.
To tell you, that my cousins were from Holyoke. And Worcester is not a big town. Let me say that. And go ahead.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point. Yeah. They're taking baseball away from small communities where baseball was king. Baseball was the central point of the summer for these communities, and they're taking it away from these communities. So, I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, it's how you build the game. And when I was a kid growing up 100 years ago, they played the World Series in the daytime, and kids could come home from school like me and watch the last few innings of a game. Now they play the World Series at 8:30 at night, and I got to go to bed because I got to do my homework, and then I got to go to bed. So they're losing a generation of kids.
Absolutely.
They've done that. They've cut their nose off to spite their face. That's number one. Now they're just taking it to the next step by killing it in communities all across the country. and eventually the baseball will be a memory for us, I think. I mean, it's just awful. It's an awful thing that they're doing to our game.
Yeah, I agree completely.
You mentioned Holyoke. The first game that I ever went to as a kid was with the Holyoke Millers. And I went
really?
To it was a day. Yeah, it was a day game in on a Saturday. You know, my dad took me. You know, and then I went to games when I was a teenager in Pittsfield.
Whoa! And my first minor league game was in Springfield when a kid coming up with the Giants named Al Stanek pitched either a perfect game or a no-hitter that day, and I followed him for years. I still think about him. The minor league experience cannot be described. We were sitting as close as in Ebbets Field, which was, you guys will remember that as a bandbox. There weren't many places that you could be intimate in the majors. Ebbets Field was one of them. And the minor leagues, all of them give you that. And you can't describe that. When you're a kid and you're this close to future heroes, and guys are not yet affected by being spoiled by too much money or adulation, and they're just human beings, and that's the minor league experience
also
to me.
Talking about the plant, the ballpark. I went to a game one year. I was covering, I think, the Indianapolis 500, and we had the day before the race, and we went to the ballpark where the Indianapolis Ball Club was playing at home game. They were playing a doubleheader. And the first game they played, I don't know, 7 innings or whatever it was, and they played and it was over. And now we're going to play the second game. The second game starts, and Indianapolis finds itself not getting any hits. And there's an old guy sitting on the third base side, I remember. He's like 50 feet from the third base coach's box. And he shouted out around the fourth inning, he shouted out to the coach, "You all going to get any hits in this game?" And the coach turned around and he said, "Hang in there, coach. Hang in there, pal," you know. But it was that kind of interchange that you can't get. You don't get that at a major league ballpark because the field, the fans are very far away from the players. In baseball, in minor league baseball, there's an intimacy between the fans and the players, and that's going to be gone. I mean, it's awful. That's an awful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How and is all this consolidation or whatever it is with baseball? Is this all Manfred's idea? Who actually comes up with this crazy scheme?
Oh, anybody know? Part of it.
Yeah, it was the brainchild. It was the brainchild of Jeff Lunau. And then it was supported by, I mean, there isn't anything that the Astros didn't do that the Milwaukee Brewers and Baltimore Orioles came, following after them like a pair of corgis. Those three organizations are almost all behind most of these changes because they arrogantly feel that they can do all this for much cheaper just with video scouting and what have you. It's like that's what they feel like this can be done. And of course,
why do those three teams? How did they get all this so-called power? I mean, to do that kind of stuff.
Well, they were able to sell the other 27 on well, this will save you money too, and unfortunately that talks.
It's like the blind leading the blind, I guess. I don't understand
exactly.
it.
I don't understand it either.
You got a couple of guys in there who are really not baseball men, but bean counters, and
right.
that's the killer right there. It reminds me of there was an old-time baseball owner. He was originally, I think, from Germany or Austria someplace, and he came over and he made a lot of money in the beer industry. And he bought either a major league or a minor league, bought a minor league team, I guess it was in those days. And he advertised the team to come out to the ballpark because they had the biggest infield in all of baseball. So, yeah, really? Nobody told them that all the infields are the same size.
They're all the same, right?
Yeah. But that's how he went around advertising his club. And
I
that's
had a friend who was a sports writer in Florida, and he just got sick and tired of the grind, and he invested with a couple of friends, and bought himself a minor league ball club in upstate New York, I think. And he would do everything. He was cooking hot dogs. He was cleaning the clubhouse. He was doing everything and having the time of his life because he felt like he was doing something positive rather than sitting there and watching a game and writing 600 words or so about it. Right. You know, and I mean, it's a way of life, and it's being cut off for no particular reason that I can figure out.
Yeah.
Well, when I was doing Tops, I covered primarily the Northwest League and the California League. And I can't tell you how many franchises were a family affair where the wife was in charge of the concessions and a kid might be taking the tickets and this sort of stuff. And that's gone. And Luke, you started something. You started off with something. Is the major leagues going to compensate these people for building stadiums? You know, they're small, but they're new, and they're maybe a $5 million investment in some of these cities.
I don't think they will. I mean, right now that's the price tag on Neil deMouse's book site called Field of Schemes. He says the total money spent on these teams that just got eliminated was $249 million in terms of stadiums built. And my feeling is like you just shot yourself in the foot because you wanted to upgrade all these stadiums, and that's fine. You might succeed. And I don't know if you guys heard about what they did. When they did the invite for these teams, you had to do two things. You had to, one, you have to sign away your rights to sue, and two, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And you don't even get all the terms until you sign those two things. And
you're signing it before you understand what you're signing. That won't stand up in court.
I don't know if it's a stand-up in court or not, but the bottom line is that a lot of these people are making these Faustian bargains, and it's like, I don't see what they're going. Then these teams are going to go to these municipalities and say, we need to upgrade the stadium, so that's what's going to happen. And I don't see how that's going to happen. And what I'm worried about, or what I fear, and then maybe this is the whole plan, is that when they can't do that, they're going to buy these guys out, and they're going to reclaim all their franchise.
I don't know how long.
Famously, in the 1990 agreement, the Atlanta Braves saw what was happening and bought as many of their affiliates as they could. Last I checked, they owned 6 of their before they knocked it down. They owned 6 of their 7 affiliates. That's unusual. Very few teams own that many.
Go ahead. May I ask Hal about the New York Mets and Syracuse? You're a Syracuse aficionado.
I have some.
You have your money.
Syracuse,
you have your money in Syracuse.
Yeah. My son and my money went to Syracuse. I got to tell you, the Mets, hopefully with the new ownership of Steve Cohen, will be more professional in their operation. But only the Mets could figure out a way to have their number one farm club in Las Vegas that was for several years. Now, Las Vegas is 3/4 of the way across the country. Why would you do that? Why they'd call up a player and it'd take them 2 days to get where he had to go. You have to have an affiliate close by. And fortunately now, Syracuse is about 250 miles away from Citi Field. So you can get a player there in maybe 5 hours, but that's the optimum. You want that. The Yankees have a ball club in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Perfect. Couple hours drive away from Yankee Stadium. But to have your minor league affiliate, why would the Mets have had their minor league team in Las Vegas? Well, can you follow the money? there was money involved, that they were getting money to put a team in Las Vegas. So to hell with the quality of play in Citi Field when you call up a player and he's been flying all night to get to you. That didn't matter to them, and that made me sick. And really, it was an unfortunate circumstance. Now they're much better off with the team in Syracuse because it's only a few hours away.
They purchased the team in Syracuse to keep that from ever happening again.
Good.
It wasn't even necessarily their fault. Up until now, there used to be every 2 years there'd be about 30 franchises would open up and they'd be able to negotiate with all 30 teams. And most of the time they re-out, but every now and then they'd switch. And unfortunately, sometimes you'd lose the game of musical chairs. That's how the Nationals, for example, ended up in Fresno. They lost the game of musical chairs. They couldn't relocate to another because, remember, Syracuse bought them. They used to be a Syracuse affiliate. So then they had to find a new affiliate. They couldn't find one in the International League. The only one they could find was Fresno, which at that point everybody else had a dance partner.
Hey,
does that make the least bit of sense to any of you guys? To have a team in Washington, D.C. with a farm club in Fresno, California? I don't get that.
Made no sense. But that's one of the things they said that they were going to try to get rid of. And in many ways they have succeeded. You're not going to see that anymore. But poor Fresno just
Luke, because time is running out a little bit, and I know more about these three guys than their parole officers. So what I want to find out is a little about you. How did you first become interested in the minor leagues?
Well, I was always interested in baseball. I was growing up. At one point, I went to journalism school. I got a journalism degree. I went to another journalism school. I got another journalism degree. I was going to be a sports writer, but when I got out, I found that the newspapers had changed, and so I had to leave the newspaper business. I caught the minor league bug in the early 2000s. Actually, you guys talk about an independent team. It was an independent team in my hometown then at the time, Lynn. And I just caught the bug, and I loved baseball. So then I moved down here to Virginia, and I started to follow the Washington minor leagues, and I became a season ticket holder. An opportunity came up for me to help out with the site. The kid eventually gave me the site, and I've been running it ever since. That's pretty much how it is. I'm a former sports writer that had to change careers, like so many of us.
Beautiful. You're a terrific guest. Please come back.
No problem.
Formal invite. All right.
Okay,
and,
great.
Thank you, David Hubler, for introducing a new friend to Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Thank you, George Case, for your very being, and thank you, Hal Bock, for yours. This is Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tycho, the weak link of it all, and I want to thank you again for listening, everybody, and we'll be back when we're back. Happy trails to everyone.
Yep.
Stay safe. Stay safe.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yep. Bye.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.